Week 7 of the 2019 college football season is in the books, which means it's time for another Johnny Talk Sports Top 10 College Football Playoff Ranking. So the rankings were bound to change this week because with my rankings last week, there was two top 10 matchups. We had the Red River Showdown between Oklahoma and Texas, and we had a showdown in Death Valley between Florida and LSU. But before we can settle the dust from those two big matchups, the biggest shocker of the college football season so far, South Carolina goes into Athens and upsets the Georgia Bulldogs 20-17 in double overtime, which at the end of the season, this could be the biggest upset of the college football season. It is so far because this is the biggest one that has affected the college football playoff ranking. So after I get done with my top 10, there is something interesting with this top 5 in particular, maybe even top 7. So let's get to my rankings, and before I get to them, I do want to say that I'm going to put the previous two rankings in the description box down below so you guys can kind of see the progress the rankings have been throughout the recent 2 weeks and this week as well. So to kind of get a little acquainted with how the rankings have been so far. So at number 1, I have something that I've never done before. I have a tie for number 1, and I'll explain why. At number 1, I have a tie between LSU and Clemson. And the reason why I have this as a tie, for LSU, I think they've had the best resume so far in college football. They're still undefeated. They have a convincing win over Texas on the road, although maybe now it doesn't seem as impressive as it was before, but it's still impressive to go on the road. And especially if Texas can end up coming back and winning the Big 12. That's going to be huge for LSU's resume. And also, beating Florida tonight by 2 touchdowns. That's a huge resume booster for the Tigers because Florida was the number 7 team in college football. So LSU, based off the resume, I think is deserving of the number 1 spot. And with Clemson at number 1, I feel like I've covered the last 2 weeks, I feel like Clemson is still deserving of a number 1 spot, even though they had that scare against North Carolina. But with the events that has taken place today, Clemson's win over North Carolina actually looks better now than what it did 2 weeks ago. Because North Carolina, in case you don't remember, North Carolina beat South Carolina in week 1 of the season. And now that South Carolina has beaten Georgia, now Clemson's win over North Carolina looks a lot better. And who I have at number 3, Alabama, their win over South Carolina now looks a lot better because their win over South Carolina was a road win. So I look at a lot of different factors. Resume is one, who you're beating is another, where the teams you've beaten are, where they were at the time and where they are now, and what's happened around the college football landscape. Because this win over South Carolina for Alabama, it's better now than it was a couple weeks ago. So Alabama at number 3. At number 4, I have Ohio State, and I feel like even though Ohio State has those 2 convincing wins, one over Cincinnati, who's now in the top 25, a team that's probably going to go up in that top 25, because a lot of the bottom teams in that top 25, like Texas A&M and Memphis, went down today. So Cincinnati will move up a couple spots to make Ohio State's win a lot better. But Ohio State's win over Michigan State, it may not look as impressive down the road considering Michigan State was shut out by Wisconsin today. So right now, it's a really close battle between the top 7 teams. I feel like right now we're in a 7-team race for 4 spots, assuming everything that is possible that ends up with 4 undefeated teams takes place. So right now it's 7 teams fighting for 4 spots at this point. But of course, anyone with 1 loss is still in the college football playoff race. So the Utahs, the Arizona States, they're still in it. Even Florida's still in it. Even Auburn is still in it. So any team with 1 loss is still in the college football playoff race. And like I said earlier, just a second ago, Ohio State's 2 convincing wins over Cincinnati and Michigan State. I do like the quantity, but I favor it over the quality at this point. I just don't feel like it's right to move up Ohio State all the way to even number 3. Well, I had Ohio State number 3 last week, so for Ohio State to stay at number 3 or even move up to number 2, I feel like it's not right to bump a team up because they didn't play. But the only reason why I moved up LSU to number 1 is because they have a resume right now. Their resume, I think, is better than Ohio State's at this point. Number 5, I have Oklahoma. Oklahoma. This was a game where we were hoping to see what Oklahoma was made of. Oklahoma's defense stepped up. They're really impressive in the game. And Oklahoma, I think, is just on the outside looking in right now. But if Oklahoma wins out, I feel like they're going to be one of those 4 teams. At number 6, I have the Wisconsin Badgers. The Badgers had their 4th shutout of the season, shutting out Michigan State. You could even argue and say Ohio State's winning against Michigan State right now isn't as impressive as Wisconsin win over Michigan State. But I still think the Badgers at number 6, I still think that's a perfect spot for them at this point. Number 7, I have Penn State, and Penn State picked up a big win on the road against Iowa this weekend. Penn State number 7, they're going to have a huge test next week against Michigan. So we'll get another look at Penn State to see how good this Penn State team really is. I think it was a good win for Penn State this week. The players went through a lot this week receiving the... It was good how they rallied around their teammate, getting that letter from the Penn State alumnus, or a Penn State alumnus, you know. I feel like that was a good... I think that was a good win for Penn State considering the events that took place this week. To rally around one teammate, I thought that was very touching. So Penn State number 7. Number 8, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And the Irish, they did dominate against USC tonight. Even though the scoreboard, it may not show it. But the Irish, they dominated most of this game. But the defense just kind of let up towards the later portion of that game. So I think Notre Dame at number 8, I think that's a solid spot for them. Although I think the loss for Georgia against South Carolina could come back to hurt Notre Dame, especially if Georgia loses again. At number 9, I have Florida. And I know Florida lost by double digits, but I think as soon as I tell you who my 10th team is, I feel like you're going to understand my point and reasoning. At number 10, I have Oregon. And to sum this all up, even though Florida's loss right now looks worse than Oregon's on paper, because Oregon has really improved ever since that opening week. Oregon right now, they're 3rd in the country in scoring defense. So Oregon at number 10, I think that's a good spot. I'm giving Florida the benefit of a head-to-head win over Auburn, because Florida has a win over Auburn and Oregon does not. So Oregon's one loss is to the team that, well, to a team that Florida beat. So I'm giving Florida the benefit of beating a team that Oregon did not beat. So that is my top 10. So what's interesting about this top 7 is it's quite possible that 4 of these 7 are going to win out and finish undefeated. It's quite possible. Like LSU and Alabama, they're going to have to play each other later in the season. Ohio State, Wisconsin, they're going to play each other at some point in this season. And could Penn State possibly run the table? I feel like we need to see a little bit more out of Penn State. They'll get a test next week against Michigan, so we'll see how good this Penn State team really is. So right now, I feel like it's possible that could we see a Big Ten team get left out of the college football playoff picture when this is all said and done. I think it's only right to include undefeated Power 5 teams. So whoever loses between LSU and Alabama, they need to hope that Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State, and whoever wins the game between LSU and Alabama does not finish undefeated. Because I think if you have Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and LSU or Alabama finish undefeated, I feel like even if the team that loses that game, even if it's one of those 9-6 thrillers that we saw back in 2011, I think it's going to be really hard to put in that one-loss team over other undefeated teams. I feel like if we get 4 undefeated teams that finish 13-0, I feel like it's only right that we put in those 4 13-0 teams. So at this point, it's take care of your business. And if you're Notre Dame, Florida, Oregon, Auburn, Georgia, Utah, Arizona State, you're just hoping that some chaos happens in front of you. You're hoping that Ohio State goes down, Oklahoma goes down, Wisconsin, Penn State. You want Notre Dame and Florida to go down again. So if you're on the outside of that top 10, you need chaos to happen in front of you. I think if Oregon could win out, though, or Florida could win out, there could be a chance. But I would lean towards if Oregon wins the Pac-12 and Auburn wins out. I think Oregon could get in. I really do. Especially because Oregon has been improving week after week. And Oregon has a daunting schedule coming up. They do play against Washington on the road next week. So that's going to be a huge road test for them. So that's all I have this week. My new top 10. Comment your thoughts on it down below. I will see you next time. Have a good night, day, whenever you're watching. I will see you soon.